Do you dream of waking up, walking out your back door, and stepping right into your boat? No trailer, no marina fees, no hauling across town on Saturday morning, just you, the water, and open lake ahead. Well, here in Louisiana, that's not a fantasy. It's a real lifestyle, and it's more within reach than most people think. I'm Margaret, and I'm born and raised right here in New Orleans. And today we're going inside Clipper Estates in Slidell, a gated canal-front community where the boat behind the house dream is absolutely real. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what waterfront living costs, what your money gets you, and whether this lifestyle fits your life. So let's talk about what waterfront actually means down here, because Louisiana waterfront is not what most people picture when they move from out of state. When buyers first start researching, they usually fall into one of two camps. There's the lifestyle buyer. They want the view, the vibe, the sunset over the water from the back porch. They're not necessarily putting a boat in the water every weekend, but they want to feel like they could. And then there's the boater. They need direct water access, a private slip, and the ability to be out on the lake within 15 minutes of deciding to go. These two buyers have very different needs, and Louisiana has options for both, but the cost difference between them is significant. Now, for anyone watching from out of state, here's something you need to understand about how waterfront works in Louisiana. We don't just have one kind of water access. There are bayous, which are slow-moving natural waterways winding through marsh and cypress. There's direct lakefront on Lake Pontchartrain. There's Gulf access for the serious offshore boaters. And then there's the canal system. And this is where it gets interesting for communities like Clipper Estates. A canal-front neighborhood means exactly what it sounds like. Developers cut navigable canals directly through the community, and each lot backs up to one of those canals. Backyard bulkhead is your dock. The canal connects to larger waterways, which connect to the lake. So a boater living in Clipper Estates can go from coffee on the dock to open water on Lake Pontchartrain in roughly 20 minutes, depending on the vessel and the route. That kind of access simply doesn't exist in most of the country. In the Midwest, you're landlocked. In most suburban markets, waterfront means a decorative pond or a retention basin. Here it means navigable canal with real depth and real destination. Compare that to how most boaters find in non-waterfront suburbs actually live. They own a boat, they store it in the driveway or a storage facility. They hook up the trailer on Friday afternoon, drive to a public boat launch, wait in line, and finally get on the water 2 hours after they decided to go. Slip fees at the marina run anywhere from $400 to well over $1,000 a month, depending on vessel size and location. And spontaneous boating, deciding at 7 a.m. on Tuesday that it's a perfect morning on the water, that's just not realistic when you're trailering. That's the lifestyle gap we're measuring today. And there's a cost difference between living with direct canal access and simply being near the water that most buyers never fully calculate until they're already in contract. So let's start where most buyers start, with New Orleans proper and what waterfront actually costs on the South Shore. What waterfront costs you in New Orleans. The South Shore waterfront market is concentrated in two areas, Lakeview and the Lakefront Peninsula running along Lakeshore Drive. These are the neighborhoods buyers mean when they say they want a waterfront home in New Orleans. And they are genuinely beautiful. Mature oak canopies, elegant mid-century architecture, proximity to City Park, and the restaurants along Veterans Boulevard. For a certain kind of buyer, there's nowhere else in the metro they'd consider. But here's what you're actually buying when you pay waterfront prices in Lakeview. In most cases, you're buying the view, not the slip. The vast majority of lakefront homes on Lakeshore Drive sit behind the Orleans Levee District seawall. The seawall protects the neighborhood, but it also separates you from the water. There's no private dock, there's no canal out back. You're looking at the lake from across a boulevard and a public park. It's a stunning view, and it carries a serious premium. Homes directly on or adjacent to the lakefront in Orleans Parish regularly list between $700,000 and $1.2 million, with price per square foot running $300 to $400 or even higher on updated properties. For that number, you're typically getting a home built somewhere between the 1950s and 1980s on a standard city lot, with the renovation history that comes with older construction in a post-Katrina market. Now, further into Lakeview proper, prices come down slightly. You're in the $500,000 to $850,000 range for a well-maintained home, but you're also several blocks from the water, paying a neighborhood premium rather than a true waterfront premium. The lots are narrow, driveways are tight, and the infrastructure beneath your feet is the same aging city drainage and utility grid that runs under the rest of Orleans Parish. Insurance is where the math gets uncomfortable. Flood insurance in Orleans Parish is not optional, and it's not cheap. Even with an elevation certificate working in your favor, homeowners in Lakeview are routinely paying between $4,000 and $8,000 annually in flood premiums alone, depending on their base flood elevation, the age of the structure, and whether they're in an A or AE zone. Add a homeowner's policy on top of that, wind coverage is separate in Louisiana, and Orleans Parish rates reflect the full Gulf exposure. And you can easily be looking at $12,000 to $18,000 a year in combined insurance costs on a $900,000 Lakeview property. That's $1,000 to $1,500 a month before your mortgage, your property taxes, or a single utility bill. And then there are the costs that don't show up on any listing sheet. Older homes in Lakeview often carry deferred drainage assessments tied to the city's ongoing infrastructure work, sewer lateral replacements, foundation monitoring, electrical updates to bring aging systems up to current code. These are real line items that buyers in newer construction markets simply don't deal with at the same frequency. To be clear, Lakeview is a neighborhood we love. It has character, it has community, and for the right buyer who wants urban walkability and the New Orleans cultural fabric right outside their door, it absolutely makes sense. But if your goal is direct water access, a private dock, a boat in the water, the ability to leave from your own backyard, Lakeview is mostly not giving you that. You're paying for proximity to the lake, not access to it. And that distinction matters enormously when you start running the full cost comparison. Now let's cross the lake, because the math changes fast once you hit the North Shore. Clipper Estates, what your money actually gets you. Clipper Estates sits in Slidell on the eastern edge of St. Tammany Parish, and it is one of the few communities in the entire metro where canal-front living is not a marketing phrase, it's a literal description of how the neighborhood is built. This is a gated community, single point of entry, controlled access, the kind of security layer that matters to families and to buyers relocating from larger metros who are used to that standard. The streets are quiet, the lots are generous, and behind a significant number of homes, there is a private dock sitting over the navigable canal with a direct connection to Lake Pontchartrain. Let's talk about that canal system specifically, because it's worth understanding before you fall in love with the photos. The canals in Clipper Estates are maintained waterways, not decorative. Water depth runs generally between 5 and 8 feet, depending on the section of the canal and recent dredging cycles. Deep enough for a center console, a pontoon, or a mid-sized cabin cruiser. Clearance under the bridges within the community is a real consideration for taller vessels. So if you're running a boat with a hard top or tall console, that's a conversation worth having with your agent before you close. Once you clear the community canals and reach the lake, you're on open water. From there, you can run east toward the Wrigley's and into Lake Bourne, or west towards the Causeway and the South Shore. For offshore boaters, the route to the Gulf takes longer, but it's navigable. For the weekend fisherman or the family that wants a sunset cruise to a waterfront restaurant, the access is seamless. Now the price comparison. In the same range where Lakeview is offering you a 1960s era home on a narrow lot with a lake view across a boulevard, Clipper Estates is offering you newer construction, homes built predominantly from the 1990s through to today, on lots that are meaningfully larger, with a private dock, a 3-car garage with room for marine equipment, and in many cases, a pool. The $500,000 to $900,000 price band here gets you somewhere between 2,400 and 4,200 square feet, typically 4 or 5 bedrooms, elevated builds that reflect post-Katrina construction standards, and finished outdoor living spaces designed for a waterfront lifestyle. That's a fundamentally different asset for the same or lower price. The HOA here is active, and that's worth understanding as a positive rather than a restriction. Community standards are enforced, which protects your property value and keeps the neighborhood looking the way it does in the listing photos years after you close. There are guidelines around the dock construction, boat storage, and vessel size. Specifics you'll want to review during due diligence. But for most buyers, those guardrails are exactly what they want in a gated waterfront community. And here's what the numbers on the listing sheet don't capture. Picture a Tuesday morning. You've got nowhere to be until 10 a.m. You walk out the back door with a cup of coffee, stepping onto your dock, check the water, decide the conditions are right, and you're untying lines before 7 a.m. There's no trailer to hitch, no launch ramp to navigate, no slip fee invoice arriving at the end of the month. Your boat is already in the water. That frictionless access is the actual value proposition of Clipper Estates, and it's the piece that buyers from out of state consistently underestimate until they've lived in it for a season. On insurance, St. Tammany Parish runs structurally better than Orleans Parish for most waterfront buyers. Newer construction with engineered foundations, current elevation certificates, and flood zone designations that often come in more favorably than comparable South Shore addresses translate directly into lower annual premium. The gap isn't trivial. Buyers moving from Lakeview to Clipper Estates routinely see combined insurance costs drop by $4,000 to $7,000 over a year. Over a 10-year ownership horizon, that difference funds a serious boat upgrade or a decade of fuel. But before you start packing, there are a few things about this lifestyle that nobody talks about, and you need to hear them. The real cons nobody mentions. Let's be honest about what this lifestyle actually demands, because a canal-front home is not a passive investment. It comes with ongoing responsibilities that a traditional subdivision home simply doesn't have. And buyers who skip this part of the research tend to find out the hard way in year 2. Start with the bulkhead. The retaining wall along your backyard waterline is what keeps your property from eroding into the canal, and it requires real maintenance. Bulkheads in South Louisiana deal with fluctuating water levels, boat wake, and the kind of ground movement that comes with living in saturated soil. A full bulkhead replacement on a standard canal lot runs anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000, depending on linear footage and materials. Most homeowners won't face that bill in their first few years, but it's a capital expense you need to budget for over your ownership horizon. Dock boards warp, pilings settle, cleats pull loose. Factor in $1,500 to $3,000 a year for routine dock maintenance, and you're in realistic territory. There's also an aquatic vegetation to manage. Canal systems in Louisiana are warm, shallow, and nutrient-rich. Ideal conditions for hydrilla and water hyacinth to establish and spread. Community associations typically handle canal-wide treatments, but individual homeowners often deal with localized growth around their dock that requires seasonal attention. It's manageable, but it's not zero work. On flood insurance, and this is worth saying plainly, St. Tammany is not immune. Elevation certificates matter here just as much as they do on the South Shore. Not every lot in Clipper Estates sits on the same elevation. Not every home was built to the same standard, and two houses on the same street can carry meaningfully different flood premiums based on the finished floor height relative to base flood elevation. Before you close, get the elevation certificate reviewed by an independent insurance agent and run actual quotes. Do not rely on the seller's current premium as your baseline. It may not transfer at the same rate, and it may not reflect your risk profile accurately. The commute is real, and it deserves a straight answer. Slidell to downtown New Orleans on a clear weekday morning runs 35 to 40 minutes via I-10 and the Twin Spans. On a Friday afternoon during Jazz Fest or the morning after a significant storm when the interstate narrows to one lane, that same drive can stretch to 90 minutes or more. If you're in an office 5 days a week in the Central Business District, that's a genuinely quality of life calculation. Remote workers absorb it easily. daily commuters need to drive it at rush hour before they decide. Slidell's restaurant scene, its retail, its day-to-day conveniences have grown considerably over the past decade. Old Town Slidell has real character, and the dining options along Fremont Avenue are solid. But if Saturday night means jazz on Frenchman Street and Sunday brunch at a table in the Marigny, you're looking at a 45-minute round trip minimum every time. That's not a deal breaker for most buyers who choose this lifestyle deliberately. It's a deal breaker for buyers who discover it after closing. Hurricane season is the last piece nobody fully prices in. Securing a boat ahead of a storm is a real logistical event. Who this lifestyle is actually for. So, who actually belongs in Clipper Estates? Let's be direct about it. The buyer who thrives here is an active boater first, not someone who thinks they might get a boat someday, someone who already owns one or has a specific plan to buy within the first year. If the canal access isn't something you'll use consistently, you're paying a waterfront premium for a view, and there are better value plays in St. Tammany for buyers who just want space and a good school district without the maintenance obligations that come with canal frontage. Beyond the boater profile, this community draws two other groups in a big way right now. The first is remote workers relocating from higher cost of living markets, California, the Pacific Northwest, the Northeast corridor. When you're coming from a market where $900,000 buys you 1,400 square feet with a shared wall and street parking, landing in Clipper Estates with a 4-bedroom elevated home, a 3-car garage, a pool, and a private dock on navigable water is a genuine life upgrade. The dollar stretch here is real, and buyers from those markets feel it immediately. The second group is semi-retired and retired buyers who spent decades dreaming about this lifestyle in a position to build it. They want the gated security, the quiet streets, the ability to be on the water whenever the mood strikes, and a community of neighbors who are living the same way. Clipper Estates delivers all of that without the noise and density of an urban address. What it doesn't deliver is New Orleans, and that's worth naming plainly. If you need the culture, the restaurants, the music, the street-level energy of the city woven into your daily life, if that's not a weekend trip but a daily expectation, then Clipper Estates will feel like a trade-off rather than an upgrade. The right buyer for this community has made a deliberate choice to prioritize water access, space, and privacy over proximity to the urban core. They're not settling, they're choosing differently. Bernard and I work with buyers on both sides of this decision regularly, and the pattern we see is consistent. The buyers who move to Clipper Estates and never look back are the ones who came in with clear eyes about what they were gaining and what they were leaving behind. The ones who struggle are the ones who bought the water view and forgot to account for the drive. This is why the consultation matters. Getting honest about your actual lifestyle, not your ideal lifestyle, your real one, is the conversation that saves you from a move you'll regret. If you're working through that question right now, figuring out whether the North Shore fits your life or whether the South Shore address makes more sense, that's exactly what Bernard and I help people think through. All our contact information is in the description. Whether your timeline is 9 days or 90, feel free to reach out. The boat behind the house dream is real in Louisiana, and Clipper Estates is one of the clearest paths to it at a price point that still makes financial sense when you run the full numbers. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what that lifestyle actually costs and what it delivers, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. And check out our next video where we cover Clearview Parkway, the heart of Metairie, so you can see what waterfront adjacent living looks like when you want to stay close to everything the city has to offer.